Hey everyone, and welcome to a new UJAM walkthrough. Today I will take a short look at this new Usynth title, Usynth DELUXE. Oh, and I missed one release due to rather unoriginal circumstances. So let's also talk about another new Usynth title, Usynth CORE. What makes a new Usynth title anyway? Let me quickly describe the process. So there's crazy people like this guy or that guy, different as they may look on the surface and in hairstyle preference, they share a deep inner craving, the lust for collecting synthesizers. I originally would have called it gear acquisition syndrome, but they preferred this terminology. Either way, for a new Usynth title, much like with beatmakers, a concept or philosophy is chosen, maybe a genre, and then these crazy people walk the endless corridors of their synth collections. They will sample the originals, dial in oscillators to match, maybe combine them in some way with big multi-sample sets of these originals, ponder about what useful modulations to put on these author's choice knobs, and so on. With the goal that the plugin gives one access to the sound of these monsters without having to study 500-page manuals. It's because of this hybrid synthesis and sample library structure that a new Usynth title isn't just a 50 kilobyte download of new settings. Sorry for that. Anyway, if you want to know more about the underlying philosophy of Usynth, mainly being obscenely easy to use, I talked at length about this in the last walkthrough. So this time, let me put the focus on the overall sound, individual patches, and the artistic aim of these two titles. Less talking, more sounds. Usynth DELUXE goes first. So this guy, I don't dare to try to pronounce his name, produced this nice and smooth, soul-oriented title. Obviously, that will include some butter basses, you know, with that mildly saturated tape-like character. I also love this one for its slightly out-of-control sound. A nice thing to go with these are subtle and dark wobbles and bleeps, or as Sarah Feldman recently called them, beep boops.
Beep boops. Beep beep boops. Weird beep boops.
Another interesting aspect are these clavinet and Rhodes-like sounds. There's actually some complex multi-sampling involved here, considering that this guy, like all good nerds, owns several of these old treasures himself. But for these synth purposes, what you get are somewhat hybrid sounds. Modern soul music very much likes to play with these. It sounds like a Rhodes, but it isn't really Rhodes, is it? Sounds. Or this poly sound, which for some reason makes me want to say that it sounds French. Nice. I also love this section with classic choir that doesn't quite sound like a choir sounds. And of course for soul you need cheeky and smooth leads. But these days, of course, you also need sequencer sounds. You know, those short and percussive, well, beep boops.
Beep boops. Beep beep boops. Weird beep boops.
These kinds of sounds obviously profit immensely from Usynth's ridiculous arpeggiator. And of course, the finisher effects to go with it. And the hilariously nerded out randomizer function that hides behind this surprise button. And that's Usynth DELUXE. As always, feel free to download the 30-day demo that runs without any restrictions. And then there's the brainchild of this guy. Since I described his wild past before, here's just a short version. Industry veteran, worked on several milestones of synthesizer history, owner of UJAM's fanciest webcam setup for Zoom meetings, 4 decades of experience, one of the 3 people worldwide that know how to actually program FM synthesizers. That's enough. What he did is basically a, well, Synth 101 collection, the core essentials, the building blocks of the archetypes of synthesizer sounds, Lonely Island type stuff. That's all the metaphors that I can think of right now. What this means for me is that I get to do another round of silly sound-alikes, where I point to the giants of music history. But to avoid copyright infringement, let's rather create loving tributes with a bit of silliness by, as always, playing everything upside down. I'd say this is an archetype. Or how about authentic basses from ancient times when single oscillators drove over the German highway equivalent? Or classic 80s hook sounds. And the polysynth sequences to go with it. Or juicy monosynths. Or, obviously, this. And while we're being silly, this. but also super funky late 90s bleep synths. Or pad classics, sampled from, reminiscent of hardware synth classics that you can buy for a mere 20,000 euros on eBay. Or icy bells with the digital clarity and precision of wavetable and FM synthesis. Current day pop music loves these, just as much as ultra-happy EDM lead sounds. Or one of my personal favorites, string ensemble synthesizers from the 70s, trying to sound like the real thing, failing, and thus accidentally becoming a super classic sound in the process. Or while we are talking about accidental classics, how about some acid bass lines? Which can be modulated in many ways despite Usynth's ultra-simple interface. Thanks to these knobs being a lot more multifaceted than normal filter and envelope settings. But also thanks to the aforementioned knobs that will always point to the most interesting, or logical, or outlandish modulations for a sound. And may I also use this opportunity to point out that Usynth can sound fat. And wide and aggressive if you want. But also smooth and scoring friendly. As always, please judge for yourself and download the 30-day demo that runs without any restrictions for a month. And that was Usynth Core and Usynth Deluxe.
Beep boops. Beep beep boops.